When you think of the most important U.S. presidents, who comes to mind? You're probably thinking Lincoln, maybe Washington, or FDR. But what if I told you that one of the most impactful presidents, a guy most people today have never even heard of, completely changed the face of America in just one single term? Well, that's what we're talking about today, the 11th President, James K. Polk. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't a real question. This was a taunt. This was the mocking chant his opponents, the Whigs, yelled during the 1844 election. To them, Polk was a total nobody, a political lightweight. They just couldn't believe this guy was even in the running against their superstar candidate, Henry Clay. And, they kinda had a point. Polk had been Speaker of the House, sure, but his career was sputtering out. He just lost 2 elections in a row for governor of Tennessee. So when the Democratic convention got deadlocked and couldn't pick a nominee, they just plucked him from obscurity as a compromise. He was America's very first dark horse presidential candidate. But here's the thing about this dark horse. He came into the race with an unbelievably clear plan. Right off the bat, Polk made this stunning promise. He would only serve one single 4-year term. He wasn't trying to build a career. He had a to-do list, and he gave himself exactly 4 years to get it all done. So what was on this list? It wasn't just vague campaign slogans. Polk laid out 4 concrete, incredibly ambitious goals that would become the roadmap for his entire presidency. And here they are. It's really a 2-part agenda. The first 2 goals were all about overhauling the nation's economy. The other 2, they were about radically expanding the borders of the United States. I mean, achieving any one of these would be a huge deal for a president. Polk promised to do all 4. Okay, so let's start with how he literally redrew the map. Polk was a true believer in manifest destiny. That was this hugely popular idea at the time that the United States was basically destined by God to stretch all the way across the continent. And Polk chased that vision with this relentless, almost ruthless efficiency. His first big move showed he was a shrewd negotiator. You had hardliners in the U.S. screaming 54-40 or fight, demanding all of the Oregon Territory from Great Britain, the world's superpower. But Polk, for all his tough talk, was a pragmatist. He cut a deal, a treaty that split the territory right at the 49th parallel. Just like that, he secured the land for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, without firing a single shot. So let's just paint a picture of the America that Polk inherited. The population was exploding, and people were pushing west, but the country itself just kind of stopped, well short of the Pacific Ocean. And the biggest political time bomb was Texas, which the U.S. had just annexed, making Mexico, who still considered Texas their own territory, furious. And this is where Polk's vision gets aggressive. There was a dispute over the Texas border. Was it the Nueces River or the Rio Grande further south? Polk basically baited Mexico. He sent General Zachary Taylor and his troops into that disputed land. A skirmish inevitably broke out, and that's all Polk needed. He declared that Mexico had shed American blood upon American soil, and he got Congress to declare war. The U.S. won that war, and the result was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And the sheer scale of the land grab is just mind-boggling. We're talking over 1 million square miles added to the United States. That is a bigger expansion of the country than under any other president, ever. And just like that, the transformation was complete. When Polk left office, the United States was a true coast-to-coast nation for the very first time. That whole vision of manifest destiny, it was no longer a dream. It was a reality on the map. But wait, remember that to-do list wasn't just about land? He had an equally massive plan for the country's finances, and he attacked it with the exact same focus. And he checked off his 2 big economic promises. First, he signed something called the Walker Tariff, which slashed taxes on imports. That made the agricultural South happy, and it boosted trade. Second, he brought back the independent treasury. This basically meant the government kept its money in its own vaults, not in private banks, which his party deeply distrusted. So here's the kicker. How did he pay for all this? You'd think a huge war and buying up all that land would make the national debt just explode, right? But look at this. The war cost nearly $100 million. And yet, through some incredibly disciplined financial management, Polk left office with a national debt at the exact same level as when he started. It's honestly unbelievable. So he did it. In 4 years, he accomplished every single one of his goals. You can't argue with it. It was one of the most effective presidencies in history. But, And this is a huge but. That effectiveness came at a terrible cost, and it left behind a really controversial legacy. And don't just take my word for it. This criticism comes from someone who was right there, Ulysses S. Grant. As a young officer in the war, he saw it as a completely immoral land grab. And a lot of people agreed with him, including a young congressman at the time named Abraham Lincoln. They thought the whole thing was unjust. And here it is, the most dangerous consequence of all. Every single square mile of that new territory begged a toxic question: would slavery be allowed there? That question shattered American politics. It destroyed old compromises and poured fuel on the fire of division between the North and South, putting the nation on a direct path to the Civil War. So we're left with this incredible split. Was he an effective leader? 100%. He set his goals and he crushed them. But was he a controversial figure? Without a doubt. His relentless ambition led to a war many called unjust and dramatically accelerated the country's slide into its own destruction. And that leaves us with this final, really challenging question. Polk was undeniably effective, but does just achieving your goals, no matter what they are, make you great? Or does greatness depend on whether those goals were just and on the consequences they unleash on the world? That is the complicated and powerful legacy of James K. Polk.